Hello everyone. Hello everyone. My name is Mayank and this is a demonstration video for task 4.2c repository pattern object mapping. So this task involves implementing the repository pattern in the persistence layer of application using .NET technologies, specifically focusing on fast member library for object relational mapping, that is ORM. So in this task the key learnings are: first one is the repository pattern implementation. The repository pattern is employed to encapsulate the data access logic, providing a centralized and decoupled approach to interact with database. This involves extracting interfaces from existing data classes, renaming the classes to the naming conventions, and implementing new repositories. Second, the dependency inversion principle, which is DIP. The dependency inversion principle is followed by abstracting dependencies through interfaces. This allows for easier switching between different implementations and facilitates better maintainability. And the third one is object relational mapping, which is ORM. So ORM is implemented using fast member and fast member library to map database entries to the application domain object. The fast member provides a fast and efficient way to perform ORM operations, reducing the need of manual mapping and improving development efficiency. Then we are using a dependency injection container, which is the Microsoft's built-in dependency injection container, Microsoft extension dependency injection, which is utilized for managing dependencies. However, the alternate containers such as Unity container, etc., could also be used based on the project requirements. So, on a summary basis, the key learnings can be concluded at understanding and implementing repository pattern for decoupling data access logic, applying dependency inversion principle and dependency injection for managing dependencies and improving flexibilities, implementing ORM to automate the mapping between database entries and application objects, utilizing extension methods and generics for extract enhancing code reusability and flexibility. Now let's jump into the code. So basically this one is the program.cs file. So starting with this, so firstly it is using robot controller API dot persistence. So basically this is calling the namespace from which we are accessing our other files or folders or any other type of variables which are used in these files, and this allows access to the classes defined in the namespace. Then we are creating our builder for to add the controller as a services to the application, and which is used to configure the application services and middleware pipeline. Then we are adding the controllers. So this line adds controller as services to the application service container, allowing the application to respond to HTTP request. Then we have added these two things, which is add scoped robot command data access and IMAP data access. So the IMAP data access register the scope service for accessing map data, specifying that it should use the map repository implementation of the IMAP data access interface. Then similarly we have the iRobot command access, which is mapping the robot command repository to robot command data access. Moving further, we have the we are creating our app. So this line builds the application for using the configure services. Then then this we configure our HTTP request pipeline using if statement. In this block configures the development environment specific settings such as displaying developer execution pages. Further, we are moving our we are using app dot use HTTPS redirection, use authorization, use map controllers, and app dot run. So the app HTTPS redirection adds the middleware to redirect the HTTP request to HTTPS, and the use authorization adds some middleware to enable authorization. and the map controller, this line maps controller routes for incoming HTTPS request. Finally, the app.run is used for starting our application. So moving further, now we have robot command.cs. So this file is basically used for declaring the classes for the robot command, which includes all the properties, all the constructors defined for that particular class. For example, in robot command we have six properties, which is id, string, description, is move command, created date, and modified date, which are denoted using get set properties. Then we are declaring the constructor for this, which is declared using public robot command and the parameters defined here. And these parameters are now denoted into their particular values. So this is the parameterized constructor, and also we have another public parameter less constructor, which is public robot command, and which does not include any type of properties or any type of uh, parameters in this. Similarly, as we have done for the robot command, now we have the similar class for map. For the map, so the map has seven properties, which is id, columns, rows, name, description, created date, and modified date, which are also denoted using get set properties. Similarly, we have the constructor for map class for defining the objects, and we also have the parameter less constructor for the map class as also. Now moving on to map controller.cs. Firstly, we are using the Microsoft ASP.NET Core.mvc. So basically this line contains the MVC namespace, which contains classes and interfaces for creating MVC controllers. Then this one is our, we are using our robot controller API.persistent. So this one is used for mapping and using the functions which are declared in the persistence folder in the same using in the same namespace. These are some other libraries like system collection.generic, which imports a generic namespace. Then we are using system.link. So this line imports a system.link namespace, which provides link functionality for querying collections. Then starting with our API controller. So this begins the definition of robot controller API namespace. The API controller, this attribute indicates that the controller responds to the HTTP request and provides automatic modal validation. Then we have our route for, which is the API/maps. So this attribute specifies the base route for controller actions. Moving further, we have the map controller class, and the map controller class declares a private field, which is robot map repo of type IMAP data access, which is used for accessing the map data. Then we have the IMAP data access map controller. So this one is basically a constructor of the above declared class. So this constructor for map controller class takes the IMAP data access parameter to inject map data dependencies. Then we have an robot map repo, which assigns the injected map data access instance to the robot map repo field. So now moving on to our endpoints. So we have our first endpoint, which is HTTP GET. So this indicates that the following method handles the HTTP GET request. So this request will generate all the list of maps included in the maps repo, and using the get all maps function. Then we have the HTTP GET square. So basically this endpoint will ensure that the maps for which the columns and rows are equal will be shown as an output in the window. Then we are using the another endpoint, which is HTTP GET ID. So this endpoint is used for fetching any particular map responding to that particular ID. Then we have the http post function. So this one is used for adding a new map to the uh, map list, map repository. And for using this, firstly we are checking if the new map is null. If new map data is required, it will turn a bad request. And so it will add the map to the list at the last by using the map id. And so this will add the firstly this will check that what is the maximum id which is allocated in the list for all other maps. And it will generate a new id for our new map at the last. Like if we have 5 maps in the list and we are adding a new map, then the id will be at 6. And we are generating the created date and modified date using our system time. And the new map will be inserted in the robot map repository, and it will return the name of the get and set id. It will return the details of the map which are added in the our list. Then we have our port endpoint. So this endpoint is used for updating the existing maps. And this will check that if that particular map exists or not. If it exists, it will update the map with the respective fields, and also it will update the modified date field with the current time of the system. And it will not return any type of content in the response board. Then we have our next endpoint, which is delete endpoint. So delete endpoint will ensure to remove any particular data entry or any particular map from the map list, from the list of map by. So this will firstly check if a map exists or not, and if it is not found, it will return error of not found, and else it will delete the map, delete that particular map using delete map function. Then we have our last endpoint for the map class, which is http get id slash x and y coordinate. So this endpoint will check that the particular endpoint, the particular coordinate is valid for the map defined in that particular id or not. For example, if we have a map at id number 2, and the x and y coordinate, for example, are 4, 5, x is 4 and y is 5. And for the map number 2, the columns and rows are 10 and 20, means there are 10 columns and 20 rows. Okay, then for this it will check that is this coordinate exists in that particular map. If it exists, it will return true. If it does not exist, it will return false. Moving on to robot command controller. So it will route all our APIs to all our requests using this base route, which is API slash robot commands. So firstly, similar to the map class, it is declaring a robot commands controller class, and which includes a read only of, which includes an object for of I robot command data access type, which is named as robot command rep. Then we are declaring the constructor for this. This means this is the constructor for that particular class, which was defined above, like robot command controller. And then moving on to the first get request. So firstly it will return, this is the first get request, and this will return the list of all commands using the get commands, get robot commands, which are stored in the database. Then we have our second endpoint, which is http get move. So this one will return that, and this one will return the commands, all the commands for which the is move command field is true. For example, if there are 5 fields, and in 5 fields, for 3 commands, the is move a command is true, and other 2 are false, then it will return all those 3 commands. Then we have another endpoint, which is http get id. So this one is used for fetching any particular id with any particular command with respect to this id. Then we have the http post request. This one is used for adding any new command in our existing list. So this will add that particular command in the list at the last, and it will ensure that we are adding any if a command name exists, then it will return the conflict. Like for example, if the command with same name exists in the list, then it will return a conflict, and it will return the after adding a list, it will return the details of that particular command in the request body. Then we have the put command. So this command is used for updating any particular existing command in the list. So this one will update the, firstly it will check that if that particular id exists or not, if that particular command exists with that particular id or not, then it will update that particular command, and also it will also change the modified date with the current date of the system. Then it will update that particular list, that command in the particular list, and it will not return any type of content in the response board. Then you have the last endpoint, which is the http delete id. So uh, this endpoint ensure that uh, we can delete any particular command from the list of the commands, and it will check that if that id is found or not, if that command exists or not. If it exists, it will delete that particular command using the delete robot command function declared in our I robot command data access file. And it will also not return any type of content in the list, in the response body. Now moving to the extension method.cs. So this file contains an extension method defined within a static class. So firstly, we are using the directives for importing the namespace required for the extension method, that is the fast member, and is likely used for fast access to the object members, while the npgsql is likely used for PostgreSQL database operation. Then we are using the same namespace, which is robot controller api.persistence. It is defined in the persistence folder. Now coming on to the class. So this is a static class named as extension method. Now static classes cannot be instanted and serve as the containers for static members like method and properties. So uh, the the public static void map2. So this line defines the extension method name map2. It extends the object of type npgsql data reader and accepts an additional parameter of type t, which is the type of entity to the map data. Then this one is the implementation for that. So this method begins by checking if the entity parameter is null, and if so, it throws an argument null exception. Then it uses a fast member to create an type accessor for the type of the entity. The type accessor provides a fast access to the members of a type. Next, it retrieves the names of the property of the entity using the fast members dot get members, and converts them into a hash set for efficient lookup. It iterates over the fields of the npgsql data reader, which is dr, and attempts to match each field's name with the property name of the entity. If a match is found, it sets the value of corresponding property on the entity using fast member, and it handles the db null values by setting the property value to null if the field is null in the data reader. This method essentially maps the data from data reader, such as from a database query, into the properties of entity object. So now moving on to the iRepository.cs. So firstly, this is using the npgsql library. So we are importing the npgsql namespace, which is likely used for PostgreSQL database operations. Then it is using our same namespace for which is persistence. Now coming on to the interface definition. So firstly, it defines the iRepository interface, which likely represents a generic repository for database access operations. Then we declare a constant A private constant string named connection string containing the connection string used to connect to PostgreSQL database. Then we are using a list and defines a method named by execute reader that accepts a SQL command as a string and an optional array of npg SQL parameter object. It returns a list of object of type T. This method is generic and with the type parameter T constrained to the classes with a parameterless constructor which is new. Now moving on to the implementation of this method. So firstly, it initializes a list to hold the entries retrieved from the database. Then establishes a connection to the database using the npg SQL connection class passing the connection string. Then opens the connection and creates a command object which is npg SQL command with the provided SQL command and established connection. Then it adds the parameter to the command if the provided db param and executes the command to retrieve the data using execute reader. Then it iterates through the rows returned by the data reader. For each row, it creates a new instance of type T and calls a method map to on the data reader to map the data to the entity object. Then it adds the entity to the list of entries and returns the list of entries retrieved from the database. Now, moving further to the map repository.c. So, firstly, we are using the directives for importing the namespaces, which is npg SQL, collection.generate, etc. And then the map repository class is defined within the robot controller API persistence namespace. It implements both iRepository and IMAP data access interfaces, indicating that it provides a method for generic repository operations and specific operations related to maps. Then it declares a private constant, which is the connection string, and containing the connection string used to connect to PostgreSQL database. Then we have another private field. Which is iRepository, and this declares this field is used for internally access repository methods. Then we have get all maps method. This method, this particular method is retrieves all maps from the database. It calls the execute reader method of the repository instance, passing the SQL query to select all maps from the map table. Then we have the update map function. So this one, this map updates this method updates a map in the database with the provided update map object. It establishes a connection to the database, creates a SQL command to update the map records, binds the parameters, and executes the command. Moving further, we have another function which is insert map. So this method inserts a new map into the database with provided new map object. It establishes a connection to the database, creates a SQL command to insert the map records, and binds the parameters and executes the command. Now we have our last function, which is the delete map. So this method deletes a map from the database based on the provided ID, and it establishes a connection to the database, creates a SQL command to delete the map record, bind the parameter, and execute the command. Now moving further to map.ado.cs. So firstly, the map.ado is defined within the robot controller API.persistence namespace, and it implements the IMAP data access interface, indicating that it provides a method for data access related to maps. Then firstly, it declares a connection string containing the connection used to connect to the PostgreSQL database. Then, then we have our first list get all maps method, which which is of type list. So, this method retrieves all maps from database. It establishes a connection to the database, creates a SQL command to select all maps from the map table, executes the command, and retrieves the results using a database reader. It iterates, it iterates through the rows returned by the database reader, and it iterates through the rows returned by the database reader, retrieves values from each column, construct map object. The constructed map objects are added to the list maps, which is then returned. Then we have our update map function. So this method updates a map in the database with the provided updated map object, and it creates a connection to the database and then updates the particular database. Then moving further, we have the insert map for inserting a new map into the database using the provided new map object. Then we have the our last, which is delete map. This one is used for deleting the our map in the from the list. Similarly, now moving to the robot command repository. So, firstly, it is creating the connection string for establishing a connection. Then it is creating a private repository named as repo, which is of imap data type, iRepository type, and then firstly there is a function which is of list robot command type, which is get robot command. So this one will select all robot commands from the list of the robot commands. Then we have our another function which is update robot command. So this one is used for updating the existing command in the robot from the list in the database. Then we have the insert robot command. So this one maps the insert command to insert a new entry in the database, new robot command entry into the database. Then we have the delete robot command. This one is used for removing any particular entry from the database. So this was all about the code part. Now let's jump into the execution part of this code. Now let's run this code and see the output. Moving to our postman. So firstly we will use the robot command functions. Let me show you. So this is fetching the list of all robot commands which are added in this database. Then we have our next function which is fetching any particular ID, for example 3. So this will return that particular field, that particular command from the list. Then we have our slash move, which will return all the commands for which is move property is true. As you can see, this one is the output. Then we are using the post command. So this. So firstly we will define a name for this, which is, for example, no, I will not name this I will name this as maybe click. So this is a new command, and we will remove this one because this will be generated by the system only and not in As you can see, it is created, and now let's see if it is added in the list or not. So as you can see, this particular field is added in the list and all the necessary fields are declared. Then we can use the put command, put it. Firstly, we will copy all the data in this particular list, this particular field of the command. Now after changing, we can change its name, like we can say double click, double click, okay, and other things are true. Now click on send. It will not return any type of content. Then let's fetch this one. You can see it is updated. And last one, which is the delete for the robot command, it will delete this particular record from the entry. You can see in the as you can see in the list, there is no such field named as double click in the last. Now moving to the maps, it will return the maps for which the columns and rows are equal, like this one, this one. Then fetch the map with any particular ID, for example 3. Now let's add a new map to the database. So we will post this one. So the columns I am giving are 90 and the rows are also 90, and I will name this map as a map number 5 and the description as description number 5. And I will remove these two fields because these will be generated by the system only. So now let's send this. As you can see, it is created and these two fields are also defined. Fetch this particular map from the list if it is added or not. As you can see, map number 5 is added, and then we have our next endpoint, which was checking the particular coordinate or not. So if we check 10 can exist or not, then it will return true. And now if we delete this particular map, we can delete this by using delete map number 5. So it will not return any type of content, and when we will fetch this, there is no such map existing in the list with ID number 5, as you can see. So this was all about the demonstration for the task 4.2c, which is object mapping. Thank you for watching this video.